when you got your ring on.
Oh, yeah.
Well, if I want to do a video for our next day, up there, call me and ask.
Morning, everyone, and welcome to the North Bay Police Service. My name is Jennifer Cross, Corporate Communications Coordinator, and thank you for joining us today. We'll begin with opening remarks from Chief Darrell Longworth, and he will be followed by Inspector Scott McFarland of the Criminal Investigation Section, who will provide an overview of the investigation into human remains discovered in North Bay in June of 1975. Inspector McFarland will then be joined by Detective Constable Mike Kelly of the Toronto Police Service Homicide and Missing Persons Unit, Detective Constable Sean Hoffman of the North Bay Police Service Criminal Investigation Section to discuss the application of investigative genetic genealogy and the investigative process that led to today's announcements. Following the presentations, we will open the floor to questions from the media, and I will now turn it over to Chief Darrell.
Thank you, Jen. And good morning, and thank you for joining us here today. Today's announcement is about perseverance and the importance of continuing to seek answers no matter how much time has passed. More than 50 years ago, human remains were discovered in a swampland north of North Bay. At that time, investigators worked to determine the identity of the individual, but despite their best efforts, the person remained unidentified for decades. Today, we are able to provide an answer. Through the dedication of investigators, the support of our partners, and advancements in forensic science, the North Bay Police Service has successfully identified the individual. This identification was made possible through the use of investigative genetic genealogy, an emerging investigative tool that combines DNA analysis with genealogical research. Advances in this area of forensic sciences have created new opportunities to revisit historic investigations and examine evidence in ways that were not possible many years ago. It is our intention to continue to leverage this investigative tool in both new and historic cases where it can help generate leads and advance investigations. While technology played an important role in this identification, this outcome was made possible through the continued efforts of our General Investigation Section and their commitment to revisiting a case that remained unresolved for more than 5 decades. I want to recognize the efforts of all investigators, both past and present, and the support of our partners, agencies, who contributed to moving this investigation forward. Most importantly, today's announcement is about providing answers. For more than 50 years, a family lived without knowing what happened to their loved one. We have now been able to provide them with information and bring closure to a question that remained unanswered for generations. This case is an important reminder that historic investigations matter, and the North Bay Police Service remains committed to reviewing cold cases, following leads, and using every available investigative avenue to identify unknown individuals and seek answers for families and for our community. So I'd now like to turn things over and welcome Inspector Scott McFarland to the North Bay Police Service Criminal Investigation Section, who can provide further details. Inspector.
Thank you, Chief. Hello, everyone. Before I begin with the background of the investigation, I want to acknowledge the families of those who we still have that are missing. We recognize that today's announcement may bring renewed emotions for some who are still missing their loved one. Please know that you are not forgotten. The North Bay Police Service remains committed to pursuing answers, revisiting historic investigations, and applying new investigative tools and technologies as they become available and when we have evidence to utilize them. Every investigation deserves our continued attention, and we will continue to working to bring your answers and closure to the families whenever possible. In relation to this investigation, why we are here today, in June of 1975, a partial human skull was discovered in a swamp area off Highway 11 North, behind the old Beaumark missile site. The skull was found lying In a bush area, the remains were discovered by summer students working for the Ministry of Environment who reported the discovery to the North Bay Police Service. At the time, officers conducted an extensive search of the area, but were unable to locate any additional human remains or evidence. The skull was submitted at the time to the Centre of Forensic Sciences in Toronto for examination and to confirm it was human, and to estimate the individual's age. Based on forensic analysis and information available at the time, that being 1975, the anthropologist's report estimated the individual was between 24 and 75 years of age and had been deceased for approximately 1 to 2 years before the remains were discovered. Over the following years, the investigation was periodically reviewed. However, without additional investigative leads or forensic technology available that we have today, investigators were unable to determine the individual's identity and the investigation became inactive. In 2006, DNA testing was attempted. However, a usable DNA profile could not be developed at that time. In 2012, a further DNA testing was conducted, and the resulting DNA profile was compared against 3 local missing persons. No match was identified at that time, and the DNA sample was not suitable for comparison through the available databases. In 2023, investigators revisited the case, recognizing the advancements in forensic science, particularly investigative genetic genealogy, also referred to as IGG, had created new opportunities to examine historic investigations. These advancements allowed investigators to use existing DNA sample and generate new investigative leads and move the investigation forward. The North Bay Police Service gratefully acknowledges the assistance of the Toronto Police Service Homicide and Missing Persons Unit, the Ontario Forensic Pathology Service, and the Provincial Pathology Unit, the Ontario Centre for Missing Persons and Unidentified Remains, and the Office of the Chief Coroner for Ontario. Their expertise and collaboration were instrumental in helping identify the individual and provide long-awaited answers to the family. We will not be identifying the individual for the privacy of the family, and I can say that foul play was not suspected in this case. Please welcome Detective Constable Mike Kelly of the Toronto Police Service Homicide and Missing Persons Unit, and he will provide further details. Mike?
Thanks. Good morning. Investigative genetic genealogy, or IGG, is a tool that combines DNA science with genealogy research to help identify unknown people, including unidentified human remains, and assist with historic investigations. IGG uses DNA information from forensic testing and compares it with DNA from approved genealogy resources to look for family connections. Forensic genealogists then use those connections to build family trees and develop new leads that may help identify a person. In recent years, advances in DNA technology and genealogy research have created new ways to look at cases that have remained unsolved for many years. Evidence that once did not provide answers can now be re-examined using new scientific methods. For example, in our historic investigation here involving unidentified remains, we were able to use DNA from this individual to identify his relatives through genetic genealogy. By tracing family connections and combining them with traditional investigative techniques, we were able to determine who the person was and provide answers to his family. IGG does not replace traditional investigative methods. Instead, it provides additional tools to follow or to discover new leads, to identify unknown individuals, and to continue seeking answers in historic cases. At the end of the day, IGG is an analytical process, which ideally provides a lead. IGG can work like a GPS, like it did in this case, which takes us to an individual. It takes us right to an individual using IGG, and in some instances, it can act like a compass, which directs us to perhaps a person's cultural background or other details about them, which then, where traditional investigative techniques can take us the rest of the way. So please welcome Detective Constable Sean Hoffman of the North Bay Police from their Criminal Investigation Services section for further details.
Good morning. In 2023, following advances in forensic science, including investigative genetic genealogy, this technology provided a new opportunity to re-examine the case and search for answers. Using the existing DNA sample recovered from the human remains and with support from Toronto Police Homicide and Missing Persons Unit, the Ontario Forensic Pathology Service, through the Provincial Forensic Pathology Unit, and the National DNA Databank, we were able to move the investigation forward. Forensic genealogists analyzed the DNA and identified potential family connections. They developed a family tree that ultimately led to a married couple who became the focus of our further investigation. The couple's family history was reviewed, and we were able to account for the deaths and burial locations of all of their children except for one son. Historical records provided important insight into the son's life. Newspaper articles from the Porcupine Advance showed he was living in Timmins as early as 1928. He worked at the McIntyre mine and participated in community activities, including local bowling leagues. After 1950, when the newspaper ceased publication, we were unable to locate many additional records. He was on voters' lists in 1949 and 1957. However, we could not find any records confirming his death. Military records from the First World War were also reviewed, which did not show that he had been reported deceased. Military medical records placed him in Toronto in 1917 at 22 years of age and described him as being 5 feet 2 inches tall, blue eyes and brown hair. The records also indicated he was medically fit for the Canadian Overseas Expeditionary Force. Although dental records were available, we were unable to compare them because the jaw was not recovered. Investigators searched police records, missing persons records, and records maintained by the Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee. However, these searches did not provide any additional information. Investigators then located and interviewed 2 surviving family members. A great-nephew had recalled seeing him around 1953 and described him as living a quiet, private life in a cabin somewhere in Northern Ontario. This information was consistent with the location and circumstances where the human remains were discovered in 1975. The great-nephew and great-niece provided DNA samples to assist with the investigation. The results demonstrated the expected level of shared DNA for their family relationship and independently supported the findings of the genealogical research. After reviewing all evidence, including DNA results, genealogical research, historical records, and investigative findings, we confirmed that the human remains discovered north of North Bay in 1975 belonged to Claude Hamilton Brownscombe, who was born on October 24th, 1896 in Uxbridge, Ontario. On June 19th, 2026, the coroner officially confirmed the identification, and Mr. Brownscombe's next of kin were notified. I'd now like to call up Inspector Scott McFarlane as we open to questions from the media. Thank you.
I'll field the questions, and then I'm going to defer to the table here as they're the subject matter experts.
Could we kindly get the spelling of his first and last name and age at death, please?
Sure. First name, C-L-A-U-D-E, Claude. Middle name, Hamilton, like the city, and Brownscombe, B-R-O-W-N-S-C-O-M-B-E.
Okay. And do you have his age at death?
No.
Okay.
I believe when we opened it, it was between 25 and 70 years of age.
Okay.
Ada?
Go ahead, Jen.
My question is for North Bay Police. Are there any other identified people that you're currently working to identify?
We have some outstanding missing person cases, but a case like this in relation to found human remains, no.
And is this technology readily available? Do you have to, is there a waiting list for it? Is there a delay once human remains are found? What's the quickness of acting?
Mike, I'll let you speak it. Sure. In relation to IGG, I'll let Mike, who's the subject matter expert, answer that.
So the process as it relates to law enforcement, there's a procurement process that has to run through the coroner's office. Ultimately, the remains belong to the office of the chief coroner, and it's in coordination with them that we conduct this investigation. It's with their permission and their full cooperation. We come to them and express an interest. So North Bay Police contacted us to sort of assist. We got into a sort of a group of communication, discussed what types of samples were still available that might yield the type of DNA sequencing that we required. At that point, we then procured that sample and had it sent to a lab. That process typically takes about 2 or 3 months or so to develop and sequence the DNA in such a way that we have to do this type of investigation. Then it takes about another month or so to upload that profile. There's 2 websites that law enforcement are allowed to use for this type of investigation. Those websites are Family Tree DNA and GEDmatch. Those are websites that where people who get their DNA kits perhaps done at another commercial environment have the option then of porting them out of that environment and pasting them there to search perhaps over the horizon in other corporate environments or in other countries to see if they have other relatives. They're given an option then to whether or not they wish to share their profile, make it public for the purpose of law enforcement. In the cases of unidentified human remains, they're considered to be humanitarian investigations. When we upload it into that environment, then our team within the Toronto Police Service, we employ 5 full-time genetic genealogists, and they reviewed the match list, and I believe it was within 48 hours we had a potential name that required further investigation, which was then shared with members of the North Bay Police, and then we coordinated together to get other reference samples, which brought us the rest of the way there.
Can I just ask one more question? Okay. My next question is, has these genealogy kits, these independent, commercial, has this made your job a lot easier in terms of accessing data that wasn't readily available before? And how often do you use that?
So within the Toronto Police Service, the Toronto Police Service has a full-time genetic genealogy team. So we are doing this constantly. We are funded from a grant through the Office of the Solicitor General here in the province of Ontario. And we state in application of this grant that we are here to assist all of our partner agencies across the province of Ontario. Every police service in the province of Ontario has access to this program. We are always reaching out and speaking to our colleagues everywhere and saying, do you have cases involving unidentified remains or historical homicides? To be clear, we can't operate within the environments of these commercial websites. The commercial websites, we are prohibited from operating from within. We require people to pull them out. But the opportunity to engage on those stands with folks has made the otherwise impossible possible.
Chris?
I'm just wondering, I don't know who wants to answer this, but what's the reaction been from the family? Obviously, this is a generation, more than just one generation of family that was wondering where this family member was. What's been the reaction of the family when you were able to give them the news that you found him?
I'll put that one to Tech Constable Hoffman.
And I'll pass it to Mike, who lead us with the family.
Very good. So as was shared, they were quite young when they met. They live in the United States. So this was their grandfather's brother. So they had fond memories that he was a very nice man, an interesting man, and it was just one of those things where they just never knew what happened to it. I think we have to think about it within our own lives of the context of where you sort of have that thing where we all swirl in our minds and say, whatever happened to her? I wish I'd like to know. It was one of those type scenarios where like, oh, well, that's actually good to know that he's been found. And I think for any person to find out that their loved ones had been laying unidentified for so long, it actually brings a large measure of comfort to say, well, at least we know who he is. And again, he's a veteran of the First World War, so even more important that he get the respect of his name back and regain that dignity.
Then the other one was, you'd mentioned that he lived in a cabin in Northern Ontario. Could you comment on the relation from this cabin that you think he may have lived in compared to where he was found? Like, were they close by? Can you comment on that at all?
So it was the great nephew who had indicated he lived in a cabin.
Okay.
We have been unable to determine kind of Claude's movements from 1959 onwards. That's our last public record, so we're not sure how he went from Timmins to North Bay at this time.
Eric?
Yeah, just a question about what kind of DNA was found on the skull. Can you speak to that?
Okay, so the type of DNA that we utilize for IgG, traditional types of DNA that we would understand it up until about 10 years or so ago was what we call STR DNA, which is a one-to-one type of comparison, which we could use to compare, say, an offender to evidence left at a scene. What the type of DNA sequencing that we use for IgG is called single nucleotide polymorphisms, which is SNP for short. And those are the commercial companies that we discussed earlier. That's the type of DNA technology that they use. It's the same biological sample, but they sequence the DNA in a different way. So it's just sort of, it's the same type of material. So there was a portion of the skull which was still retained some clean DNA despite being in very harsh environmental conditions.
And what kind of hope do you think does this give families of other missing people, other cases that are not solved? How do you think they're going to react, and what kind of hope do you think they'll get from this?
Hopefully optimism. It's just a matter of time, ideally, before we are able to solve each of these cases. I would recommend that family members maybe upload their own private kit to some of these websites, which just could assist in the use of IGG in the future as well.
The key on this, to clarify, is we have to have that evidence. We have to have evidence that we can obtain DNA from the deceased. Without that, IGG is not really useful. So in cases where there is none of that, we will always run comparisons, and that's always going on in the background. There is always hope, and that is what we hope that all our families of missing people, who I truly feel for, take out of this, is that there is hope. Clark?
It's just wanted to confirm foul play not suspected.
Correct.
Okay. And the follow-up for that one was, is there an estimation how much time passed between death and discovery?
Yeah, so the forensic anthropologist at the time put it between 1 to 2 years that the individual had been deceased. But it's a rough estimate based on what is remaining of the limited sample we had, right? So,
And again, that was based on 1975 technology and report. The DNA analysis wouldn't be able to assist with that. It was for identification purposes only.
And last question from me, is there any publicly available photo of the gentleman, perhaps in his World War I outfit or anything like that? Do we know any photos exist?
Not to the best of our knowledge. Anybody else? Going once, twice? Thank you very much. Appreciate it.